Listo, ya estamos. Bueno, buenos días a todos y a todas. Le damos la bienvenida a todos ustedes acá en esta sesión especial de nuestra cátedra de Filosofía del Derecho de la Facultad de Derecho de la Universidad Externada de Colombia. Como les habíamos prometido a ustedes, este espacio es de nuestros estudiantes de este curso en especial, y pues aprovechando la oportunidad y la suerte de tener esta vez a la profesora Maria Robaszkiewicz de manera presencial. Ella es la tercera vez que nos acompañas en este curso. Hace un par de años tuvimos la oportunidad de tenerte vía virtual, ¿sí? Hablándonos de tu gran inspiración, Hannah Arendt, aprendiendo de ti sobre Hannah Arendt y también sobre ti, por supuesto. Y pues nada, le damos la bienvenida al espacio. Voy a presentar a Maria Robaszkiewicz, que es investigadora posdoctoral de la Universidad de Paderborn de Alemania. Ella también obtuvo su doctorado en dicha universidad en el año del 2015. Se dedica al estudio de los escritos de Hannah Arendt como ejercicios de pensamiento político. Fue profesora visitante en el Centro de Estudios de Teoría Crítica y fue investigadora también visitante en el King's College Western University de London, Ontario y Canadá. Estudió Filosofía y Educación en la Universidad de Łódź, ¿sí? Polonia, en la Universidad de Finlandia y en la Universidad de Bonn en Alemania, donde tuvimos la oportunidad de conocernos cuando estaba yo también por allá. Es miembro del consejo editorial de la revista digital de Hannah Arendt, hannaharendt.net, y es investigadora afiliada del Centro de Historia de las Mujeres Filósofas y Científicas, que es un centro especializado justamente en el estudio de ese aporte o las aportaciones de las mujeres en el pensamiento. Ha publicado sobre la obra de Hannah Arendt y otros temas. Sus actuales intereses de investigación se centran en la filosofía feminista, las teorías filosóficas de la resistencia y la filosofía de la migración, especialmente en la teorización de la experiencia migratoria desde una perspectiva político-fenomenológica. La versión de bolsillo, Hannah Arendt y la política, su reciente libro en coautoría con Michael Weinmann, fue publicada en el 2024 por Edinburgh University Press y actualmente es coeditora de un volumen sobre los orígenes del totalitarismo de Arendt, libro que vamos a abordar el próximo semestre en esta materia, dentro de la serie Aniversarios Filosóficos de Cambridge University Press, junto con Ari Elmeri Hövenen. María, gracias por estar aquí con nosotros. Nada, te dejamos el espacio.
Okay, thank you very much, Natalia, and I'm very sorry that I did so many things with in Finland and with Finnish colleagues. That is a little challenge, I know that. Okay, my talk today, can you all hear me well? Okay, so my talk today will be a tiny little bit different than what was planned for technical reasons. So I will more be speaking about abortion and a little bit less about populism, but I hope it's okay. Yeah? Okay. So let us begin. On February 21st, 2022, Constitutional Court in Colombia ruled abortion to be legal on demand and without restrictions up to the 24th week of pregnancy, establishing the most liberal abortion law in Latin America. This decision, which came after a long-time protest of Colombian women, met with a backlash. Counter-demonstrations, mostly religiously motivated, conquered the streets, protesting the ruling. Colombian legalization of abortion was preceded by a historical liberation of abortion laws in Mexico and Argentina in 2021. Shortly after the Colombian reform, in June 2022, Roe v. Wade was overturned in the USA by the conservative Supreme Court, leaving women in 12 states without an access to legal abortion. On 20 January 2023, the day the US-American right to abortion would have its 50th anniversary, the Democratic White House issued a proclamation assuring the, and I'm quoting, administration is resolute in the commitment to defending reproductive rights and continuing our nation's progress towards equality for all. Protests in favor of legal abortion reignited on that day. Roughly at the same time, 35 years have passed since the Supreme Court of Canada struck down the country's abortion law as unconstitutional on 28 January of 1988. On this occasion, Canada's Prime Minister publicly reassured to keep on defending the right to abortion for every woman. In this paper, I will take a step back from these current, not anymore current, sorry, events to look back at the outbursting of feminist protests, both directed towards securing of women's reproductive rights in 2020 and 2021, both ongoing since 2016. Within the same wave of protests for women's rights and against gender-related violence in Latin America, I mentioned above, Argentinian woman won the battle for liberalization of abortion regulations in December 2020. Simultaneously, women in Poland, where I come from, faced a drastic tightening of abortion regulations already before mostly restrictive in the European Union. In spite of their geographical distance, there was a proximity between these protests, especially regarding political aims and practices, public communication, and mutual inspiration. The decisive phases of both protests were nearly simultaneous, so Polish women were drawing hope from the success of the legalization of abortion in Argentina. Hopes that still remained unfulfilled in Poland. And I just would like to very shortly say what the situation is, because this I think is very central. In Poland, abortion is generally illegal in nearly all cases. The only case that it is legal in, cases in which it is legal in are when the pregnancy is a result of sexual violence, or when the life of the mother is in danger. However, in both cases, it is only fiction, because in a Catholic and conservative country, most sexual violence remains hidden. So even pregnancies that are a result of rape are often not possible to read under this abortion law, and also because for medical personnel who is aiding in abortion, in illegal abortion, there are penalties, and it is very risky for them to undertake an abortion, even if it's pronounced legal. So they are trying to find reasons and ways not to do that altogether. So the situation is absolutely terrible, and in the end it's also comes to situations like the fetus is absolutely underdeveloped, and it is completely clear that it will not be able to survive for one day. But the woman who is pregnant still needs to carry the pregnancy until its end, or until the fetus is dead, because the danger of the fetus life is not within the exceptions of abortion ban. So just very shortly. So why do I, in face of many differently motivated women's protests, choose to focus on resistance against abortion regulations? The banning of safe and legal abortion is the only form of formalized oppression which targets all women, and not only women, also trans women. The strategic aim of such legal regulations is to keep women under control, under a threat of impossibility. Trans men, I'm sorry for that. And this is yeah, I'm really sorry. How could this happen? Okay, the banning of safe, yeah. The strategic aim of such legal regulations is to keep women under control, under the threat of impossibility of legal and safe abortion in case they wanted or felt compelled to terminate a pregnancy. A perhaps less blatant objective of such regulations, especially in the process of their establishing and implementation, is to redirect public attention, and this would be the part of my talk that would be about populism and far right. Redirect the public attention to the emotionally laden issue, which other decisions deeply affecting the community as a whole are being made behind the closed doors, in front of which we protest against the abortion ban. So my central theoretical framework is again Hannah Arendt, and I now start talking about absence of Hannah Arendt in Buenos Aires and the deceptive Arendtian body. The notion of the feminist strike once again moved to the center of feminist theorizing in 2020, this time due to Veronica Gago's book Feminist International, How to Change Everything. Gago and her compañeras from Ni Una Menos collective also came to mainstream media attention when later in the same year a law legalizing free of charge abortion up to the 14th week of pregnancy was passed in Argentina. This event was a culmination of a decade-long struggle and points to the momentum of feminism in many Latin American countries. In her book, Veronica Gago argues for a radically innovative character of the activism that developed in the process. The strike brought together not only diverse groups of women, but also people who have suffered from different forms of gender-based violence, with a particular emphasis on neoliberal practices of exploitation. Since many women do not work outside of home, opening up a strike beyond the union's framework offered them a revolutionary way to raise their voices and transform themselves from victims to strugglers. Gago demonstrates how the strike is a scene of production of the new theory of power, shaping an organizational horizon, outlining a space for multiple realities and different experiences to re-signify, challenge, and update the very dynamic of what we call a strike. As she writes, the strike is a process with moments of action, shake-up, and retreat, motivated by a collective desire to change everything. Though revolutionizing the praxis of who could call the strike, and I quote, today, from Gago, today strike has become a concrete and situated question investigation. What does it mean to strike from each other different positions? Quote him. The subtitle of this book, How to Change Everything, stole my heart. And yet, although the strike as described by Gago seems to be a very Arendtian moment, an excellent example of free, plural, spontaneous, and concerted action, Arendt is mentioned in the book exactly once in reference to Judith Butler's work. So why is Arendt absent in Buenos Aires? I would argue that the two most central reasons are, first, her disinterest and occasional dismissal of women's political movement, and second, her ascribing of the body and its needs to the private realm. Hence, not a matter of public concern, which does not fit the practices of abortion protests. It is safe to say that the relation between Hannah Arendt and feminist scholarship has been troubled. My aim is not to resolve this tension. However, I think there is a need of complicating this ostensibly mismatch, both regarding Arendt's dislike of feminism and the understanding of the private in order to distill the elements of Arendt's political thinking, which, as proved by the research of the last decades, are suitable for constructive feminism theorizing. And so, in her illuminating discussion of Arendt and identity politics, Margaret Betshall argues that Arendt did not express reluctance to feminism exclusively. Much more, it was an attempt of forging political activity out of presumably a homogeneous group, approving its numbers upon the predefined criterion and exclusive to anyone else, that prompted Arendt's disapproval. Hall shows that Arendt in fact opposed identity politics in all its form. In case of Arendt's Jewish identity, and she cites her discord with Gershom Scholem, in which Arendt opposes her being to her being framed as essentially and fundamentally, and I quote, a daughter of the Jewish people, quote end. While she does acknowledge that being Jewish is a fact of life, and she would never deny it. Hall draws our attention to the conditionality of Arendt's statement about the necessity of defending oneself as a Jew. So this is an argument in which she argues that if she is attacked as a Jew, she needs to defend herself as a Jew and not as a human being with human rights and not as anything else. Just when her identity or a part of her identity is targeted, then she needs to defend herself in relation to this part of identity and not as anything else. But it is so it is conditional. So if I am attacked as a Jew, then I have to defend myself as a Jew, but if not, then not. This means, as she explains, that one is not always bound to one's presumed identity, but that this identity, as a partial condition of what and who I am, requires addressing when needed in a particular situation. Because, as Arendt states, denying a fact of life would be, and I quote, silly. Quote end. Similarly, being a woman is not what and who I am, but it is not determined by my, it does not determine myself, as I am conditioned by everything and anything that I come in touch with. Now, a part of this is unrelated to me being a woman, and a part of it is relating to the harmful aspects of being a woman and to a patriarchal world. And it is in this latter case that I should defend myself as a woman. Even if we relativize Arendt's dismissal of feminism, this way, the central problem of the feminist critique still occasionally reoccurring in current debates namely Arendt's supposedly rigid distinction between the public and the private realms, remains unresolved. The main source used by her critics are the passages in the Human Condition, in which Arendt, largely depending on Aristotle's Politics, describes the public as a realm of light, freedom, and power, a realm where great deeds are done and relevant words are spoken, and by contrast, the private realm as dark, subjected to necessities of life, and regulated by the natural needs of the body. At the same time, she proposes three fields of activity that she finds central to the Vita Activa. Labor as sustaining and care for one's bodily needs, work as creation of artifice and the infrastructure of the world, and action as political activity gathering people in their plurality to build up a common world. In its latter activity, it is the latter activity that makes us genuinely human. Layering the grade of activities over Arendt's private-public distinction, one might intuitively think of the private as inferior to the public, and as and eclipsed into its disclosure, as an eclipse to a disclosure of the solid material body to the in the Western philosophical tradition is the transcendent mind. And as the body has been at the heart of feminist concern from the very beginning, theoretically and practically, historically and biographically, situating the body in the darkness of slavish necessity that we share with other animals, in the space for violence due to its lack of worldly reality, which means public visibility and audibility, must have sparked second-wave feminist vigilance. It didn't even help that Arendt, in the same breath, describes the private as a realm of protection and states that, I quote, from the Human Condition, that there are a great many things which cannot withstand the impact, the implacable bright light of the constant presence of others on the public scene. There are very relevant matters with which survive only in the realm of the private. Quote end. It was only in the 1990s that I quote from Sheila Benabit that reading Arendt against Arendt, quote end, became a widespread gesture among feminist scholars interested in her writings, resulting in a considerable body of literature in this field, having been produced by now. Taking Arendt's distinction between the private and the public at face value as two separated categories to which certain activities are essentially assigned is very reductive. But as Sophie Lloyd-Old argues, and decisively for my argument, human activities are not bound to public or private in an essentialist sense. Meanings can transform, and I quote from Lloyd-Old, if any activity and its space are separated through a shift of time or space. If a logic, if a logic of orientation of a space changes, an activity that previously actualized this space can occur in other spaces with different logics. Such transformations may happen deliberately or undeliberately, but in any case, they leave neither the meaning space nor the meaning of the activity untouched. So I will come back to this later. This reading changes the whole debate about the situatedness of certain events, activities, and relations in Arendt's political landscape, as it opens new possibilities of interpretation. granting the same activities and phenomena different meanings, depending on their particular situatedness. And so, in the human condition, we find descriptions of the private as a dark space of necessity and violence, in which human beings are connected with one another immediately, without the world appearing between them, as a sphere of non-appearance. But it is also described as a sphere in which what is our own is protected from the bright light of the public, where our bodies and our bodily activities are not exposed to the gaze of the others, and in this sense, as a space of relative safety. Similarly, Arendt describes the public as a realm of plural appearances, where we disclose who we are through words and deeds, to begin something new, sustaining the world we have in common. But she also describes the light of the public as harsh, the public itself implying the constant presence of others, constant being seen and heard. And she adds, and I quote, "A life spent entirely in public, in the presence of others, becomes, as we would say, shallow." The ambiguity of meaning contained in these descriptions is a sign of there being no hierarchical order of existential spaces in Arendt, as we need both the private and the public to sustain our life as human. And in the same way, as I argue, there is no simple hierarchical order of Arendt's three fundamental human activities: labor, work, and action, as she writes in the human condition. Let us, in this respect, take a better look at labor, as it is closest to the focus of this paper. Arendt describes it very briefly as, and I quote, "the activity which corresponds to the biological processes of the human body, whose spontaneous growth, metabolism, and eventual decay are bound to the vital necessities produced and fed into the life process by labor. The human condition of labor is life itself." She makes an impression as if she was rushing to the other fundamental activities, especially action, which is her core interest. But if we linger over the notion of labor and its meaning for human life, we will soon see that it is, in a way, the most fundamental of all of them. Labor entails the physical fact of having been born, having been cared for as a child, growing up. It entails having a receptive body necessary to connect to the world and learn, a motile body necessary to move. For some, these capacities might be constrained, but every body needs to be taken care of, nourished and protected to stay alive. The lifespan of the body is just as much time as we have to engage in any other activity. The body is hence a boundary material condition of human life. In this limited time, we never really leave our bodies, though we might be unconscious of them. And while we only sometimes engage in work, and only occasionally speak and act with others, we are always embodied, always relying on our bodies in everything we do. And at any moment of our lives, there is a body in every deed and word, even if this body is sometimes mediated, be it in written discourses or visual networks. Recalling Claudel's account of actualization of conditions of human life by activities, I would suggest that our condition of embodiment always remains actualized. Even in our sleep, while we wander throughout fantastic paths of the dream world, and forget them, our body stays with us, breathing, digesting, pumping blood, and allowing us to withdraw from the world we share, and even from a private place we have for ourselves. Arguably, gendered embodiment is a fact of life, too. My being a woman, inhabiting a woman's body, is a part of my condition of being a human. Though its meaning is not essential, but rather shaped by time and place in which I live. It is a condition that is, to a certain extent, natural in its materiality, and at the same time produced a product of human entanglements. Being a woman influences me and situates me in certain ways, both empowering and exposing to harm. As the world is inhabited by a plurality of human beings, and not only by myself, it is not just up to me, but also up to me, how I live my life, as conditioned by, among others, having a woman's body. So in part 2, I will be speaking about the politicization of the social. As I already described this grid of activities and spaces in Arendt. Now, bringing women's embodiment into the public is revolutionary. In feminist protests, and especially in protests in favor of securing the right to legal abortion, a taboo is being broken. Given that pregnancy is a happy object, and this is a notion by Sarah Ahmed, in most cultures, the expectation to conceal all the non-idea issues connected to it, enduring them and suffering them away from public eye, is very high. Among these issues, perceived as difficult and unhappy, abortion has a unique multispectral significance, as it prompts religious, historical, societal, and also political vigilance. Abortion is critical for many reasons, because it is being read as one of the central women's rights, as a murder, as a source of grief, as forbidden, as a necessary evil, as a token of freedom, as a personal decision, as a sin, and beyond. This is why bringing this issue to the streets is a political explosion. Assigning a particular meaning to abortion, looking at it right now, especially from positions situated in spaces where the debate and struggle over abortion inflame, it is not easy. Arendt complicates the seemingly clear-cut distinction between the private and the public through unfolding the human condition as a story of how these realms lost their existential meaning in the modern age and how this loss marked the emergence of a third sphere, the social. While we could see the human benefiting ambiguity in the public and the private, the social is empty of such meaningfulness. Arendt describes its development as a process of the private permeating a public, gradually homogenizing and living space, cancelling spaces for action and speech, and transforming our communities into societies of job holders. This, as she argues, had a catastrophic influence both on the positive function of the private, so protective as opposite to privative, and on the political realm, which was invaded by problems of the body. Questions concerning natural needs of a human being as hunger, bodily suffering, economic concerns, and the like. These social problems, as Arendt controversially states, do not need a political response and can be solved through administrative expertise, which is doubtful. So when we turn to Arendt for an understanding of feminist protests against restriction or delegalization access to abortion as a revolutionary moment, the popular reading of her account of revolution comes to mind that refers to her notion of the social. According to this interpretation, Arendt identifies the American Revolution as a good revolution, being a political new beginning sealed by the Constitutive Act. On the contrary, the French Revolution emanated out of misery of the masses that simply spilled into the public, and it led to an outburst of violence and chaos following the revolution itself, which prevented it to be a genuinely political event. This reading, however, essentializes human existential spaces and hence downplays the potential of Arendt's account of revolution to illuminate those issues which do not seem to fit into her own political register. Thinking with Arendt, against Arendt, a gesture that has not been, as I mentioned, has not gone out of fashion for the last 3 decades, Ayten Gündoğdu proposes an alternative reading of her description of French Revolution, and by the same token of the distinction between the political and the social. Gündoğdu argues that Arendt's criticism of the French Revolution was not based on the fact that revolutionaries politicized poverty, but rather that they failed to do so. She refers to the moment in which Arendt softens her seemingly firm distinction between social and political issues, or negotiates the conditions for certain phenomena to appear in the public realm and gain political relevance. One such moment is her appreciation of the early labor movement in the human condition, which forged the novel approaches to politics, tying together questions of economic justice, social change, and democratic government. Another was the discussion at the 1972 conference in Toronto devoted to her work, where she, confronted with questions about concrete examples of political issues, suggests that there was room for contextualization of which issues belong to the public realm, saying, and I quote, "At all times, people living together will have affairs that belong to the realm of the public, are worthy of being talked about in the public. What these matters are at any historical moment is probably utterly different." Quote end. Like Bonnie Honig, Rahel Yegi, or Maria Robaszkiewicz before her, Gündoğdu argues that for the possibilities of politicization of different issues that Arendt deems social. In so doing, she points to the need of a translation practice which allows an issue to be recognized as, in Arendt's words, worthy to be talked about in the public. And I quote from Gündoğdu, "Politicizing of any social injustice involves a translation that can represent it as a shared problem that hinders equalization and freedom among a community of actors." Quote end. From a feminist point of view, such a translation is needed not only for social issues, a problematic hybrid of private and public, but foremostly for issues meaningful in the private, particularly those depending on embodiment. This includes a large portion of feminist concern, also the right to decide about one's body and reproductive rights. For example, motherhood, parenthood, in vitro fertilization, the safeguarding legal abortion. And then the strike starts when the line is crossed, when the violence, the threat we strike against thickens so much that the political explosion is inevitable. In Poland, it was a threat that the draft bill proposing complete ban of abortion and jail punishment from all involved would actually pass and become a law. In Argentina, it was accumulation of facts, learning about the yet another violent femicide committed while commemorating one that had happened a year before, which coincided with the Day of Respect for Cultural Diversity, a national holiday of colonial origin. Entering the space of a protest and co-acting within it depends on a personal decision to leave one's home and step into the light of the public, to give political meaning to our deeds and words. However, there is a twist in the current protests for the right of legal abortion. When we compare them with those led a couple of decades ago, while any such protest exemplifies the abortion rights to become worthy to be talked about in the public, one of the most powerful statements the participants of the feminist strike advanced, "My body, my choice," reveals a different meaning upon reclaiming reproductive rights than it did upon first claiming of them in 1970s. On a closer look, this statement stands in opposition to the second-wave feminist parole, "The personal is political." Women emphasize their bodies to be their own, to decide about. They take responsibility for the choice, which they are often willing to discuss and share with other people who are close to them, rather than display it in the public. In spite of all the vigor in the protests, there is also a certain fatigue in them, as when Roe versus Wade overturning protester Janet Exel says, reiterating the lament so often expressed in the protest for the access to legal abortion, and I quote, "As a woman, mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother, I cannot believe we are here again." We don't want to protest for legal abortion again. It is not us who want this issue to become public again. Our right to bodily autonomy is a human right. We don't want to be forced to defend it and fight for it again. Not speaking from a universal feminist perspective, as there is no such perspective, I would argue that returning to the problem of abortion in its meaningfulness and as a private decision is in the best interest of every person capable of becoming pregnant. From where I stand in feminism, we actually want abortion to be normalized, not politicized. The politicization of an issue, assigning a public meaning to it, that I described in this paper, was preceded by politicization in another harmful sense. Forcefully drawn into the public, policed, scrutinizing, and limited from without. As opposed to this harmful politicization, public pro-legal abortion demonstrations are driven by empowering politicization of abortion practices, which eventually, in a secularized and depoliticized space of meaning, could be treated as an autonomous decision of a subject. Like other medical measures, could indeed become my choice for my body. This, I think, is the sense of advocacy groups in Canada, where there is no national abortion law to oppose the idea of including its formal legalization in the Constitution. Politicization this issue could, in the future, reopen the debate and lead to unwanted consequences. Okay, I'm coming to the conclusions now. In this paper, I suggested exploring the potential of public action, as described by Hannah Arendt, to accommodate feminist protests for legal abortion. This led me to the proposition that it is not the public where we, as women feminists, other subjects capable of becoming pregnant, allies of the protesters, want to negotiate our abortions. Abortion is an intense subject. For many, an intense experience evoking various emotions. Yet for others, it is a fact of life. From my perspective, bringing abortion concerns to the streets is not per se the most desirable way of activating women's empowerment, but it is powerful, and its necessity to react to abortion regulations being politicized in a harmful way. And I would like to close this talk with a note that in democracies, even in very liberal democracies, such rights as the right to legal abortions are never secured, and it is within the democratic process that we all cherish that this is the case. Even if we face a relatively, let's say from at least my perspective here, good situation in many countries, this might change in the future because democracy is an open process. So as the Roe versus Wade in the US, that was for quite a long time the precedents that was felt as it was quite stable shows. We just need to stay active and vigilant also in the future. Thank you so much.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Le damos las gracias a la profesora Maria Robaszkiewicz por compartirnos esta investigación, esta publicación que ella realizó en torno a las protestas sociales feministas en relación con la despenalización del aborto, como acabamos de ver, y su relación o su análisis bajo la lupa de la filosofía política de Hannah Arendt. Entonces, en este momento vamos a abrir una ronda de preguntas, si ustedes quieren hacerle a ella respecto de la conferencia, a ella también como filósofa, como profesora invitada. Lo único es que les voy a pedir que se acerquen acá al vídeo, al dispositivo, para formular la pregunta en español, y Rafael nos va a ayudar con la traducción, las traducciones que tengamos que hacer del inglés al español, ¿vale? Entonces no sé quién quiera comenzar con alguna pregunta. ¿Sí, por ejemplo? Tendrías que acercarte al dispositivo.
¿La puedo hacer en inglés?
Entonces, sí, profesor Jorge Restrepo, sí. La puedes hacer directamente en inglés, claro.
Bueno, me hago acá.
Pero, thank you very much for your talk. I'd like to ask something that somehow puts together what you said just at the end, and the whole desirability of abortion coming back to the private realm. Because somehow it seems that the private realm, of course, the idea that feminists want, women generally that are pro-abortion want, is that this becomes no longer a political issue. That it comes back to the private, that it is protected. But the realm of the private is also the realm of concealment, because it is the realm of technocracy, of administrative issues. If the barriers are put between the private and the public in such a way that social disappears, or at least that the social becomes too small, the idea is that the private is going to be regulated only by administrative decisions. And administrative decisions means, in the case of abortion, for example, the decisions of the medical profession, the decisions of insurance companies, and so on. And these decisions will, in many cases, be presented as something non-political, despite the fact that they are. Just to give a case that is very well known in the USA, in many states, women are forced to see an ultrasound before they get an abortion.
Yeah.
Right. A situation like that appears concealed, and that women are going to perceive it as concealed probably, because that's the whole point of concealment, makes it a bit dangerous for it to be in the private realm. So to what extent, if we think that at the end of it we depend on keeping the democracy forever on the issue, how convenient is it to get the issue out of the public? Shouldn't we be talking about it all the time? Shouldn't we be striking forever? As annoying as it is to strike forever?
Thank you for this great question. And well, first of all, just on the margin, I would like to mention that in Germany, for example, in Germany, abortion is generally illegal, and it only becomes legal when a woman has counseling, but oftentimes with a Catholic or other Christian organization, in which she also partly is being. So it is also an attempt to draw her from this decision, depending on the organization who is offering these practices. But this is not so. I would like to ask you back, if I might. Is there, in your question, is there a concrete difference between discussing abortion as a medical practice and discussing other medical practices? Because I see this risk also in case of other practices. So, like in the sense of, let's say, political, economical decisions of which medical practices could be financed by the state and which not, and so on and so forth. So, is there a concrete difference between this and others?
I think that there might be a degree difference, because some things do involve personal decisions and certain aspects of hegemonic power more than others.
Yeah.
But if I were to include something that were completely unrelated, let's say circumcision.
Okay.
The practice of medical circumcision, supposedly unrelated to religious practices and so on. This is, of course, treated as something of the private, and it usually includes a lot of prejudices and a lot of practices that actually come to harm people because they're never public. They're never part of the public realm because they're dealt precisely as private.
Okay, so there are different angles of looking at it. And if I looked at this question from the Arendtian perspective, but also from the perspective of the experience of feminist strikes, it is difficult to strike forever. From a Arendtian perspective, because people only punctually come together to act and speak in the public, so it cannot last forever. And from the point of view of the experience of feminist strikes, and probably all revolutions and all strikes, it is also at some point time to retrieve from striking practices, because the empowering energy is simply out. So, as much as I appreciate this this idea, and also in the sense of what I suggest at the very end of my talk, because I actually suggest something like this. Okay, so maybe not fighting in the streets all the time, but keeping vigilant all the time. So I really do appreciate it. At the same time, let us say, even if it's risky, I would very much like to see how this works in practice, if abortion is a private issue in a liberal democracy.
Thank you.
I hope this was an answer to your question. Thank you.
Ok, muy bien. En español.
La voy a hacer en español.
Sí.
Tengo entendido que nosotras tuvimos que salir a una política desde lo privado hacia lo público y desde lo emocional hacia lo supuestamente racional, que no debería ser racional sino afectivo. Entonces mi pregunta es, ¿qué estrategias o cómo se podría crear una política centrada en lo afectivo donde se tuviera en cuenta la corporalidad y las emociones sin que eso fuera aprovechado por el poder político tradicional de siempre?
Okay, so she's asking about this translation between private and public, and she's relating this to say between emotional and rational, saying that maybe in the private sector there's a more emotional decision, and the public sector would be something more of a rational decision. And she's asking what strategies women can take so that you can take into account some of the emotional, affective aspects of abortion policy.
Thank you so much. Let us say, and reminding about the way of reading Arendt against Arendt, let us say that Arendt is not a pope of political philosophy. Okay, some things that she said can be useful and interesting for us. Other proof, at least contemporarily, not on point. And I think because my interpretation of her works is in general as essays showing us how to think, but not what to think, I would say that her exclusion of emotions and affectivity from politics is in our times just anachronical. So I would argue that there is an affective element in every politics. So in this sense, women do not have to leave their affections behind, or for that matter, also men or diverse persons or whoever, yeah? But carrying those emotions into politics can be a great empowerment, as it is in the case of feminist strike. What is, I think, interesting, and what I did not mention in my talk, is that Arendt shows that because the private is protecting us, stepping out into the public generally needs courage. And it needs courage from us, and it needs courage from everyone else. Is it an answer to your question?
Yeah.
Thank you.
¿Alguien más? ¿Quiere hacer una pregunta sobre la conferencia?
Rafael, ¿vas a traducir?
Tengo una pregunta.
Sí.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. One is about what we should understand as revolutionary action, because here in the article, well, the examples that are given are pretty different. The American Revolution, the French Revolution, and then strikes. Here in Colombia, Argentina, paros, which are a different type of social resistance, which are not full-blown revolutions. And particularly here in Colombia, speaking of revolutionary action has a deep connotation because we're in an armed conflict, and we've had several civil wars. So how do we define what should be understood as revolutionary action?
Okay, this is a very difficult question when you speak about it from Arendt's perspective. Because, first of all, she was not a systematic thinker, which makes defining her notions very difficult. Yeah? And if you read, for example, essays like on violence is maybe a little bit better, but if you read her essays about civil disobedience, you just sit there and read and you are helpless. because you really don't know what is civil disobedience and what is violence in the end and what is not, and you know, it's like it goes in circles, and sometimes she contradicts herself. So some of her writings are more concrete and some less. In this sense, it is maybe a little bit difficult to define revolutionary acting. At the same time, it might be argued that every action in a Arendtian sense is revolutionary. Because action in itself, and this actually is a kind of definition, maybe not a very Aristotelian one, but action in itself is beginning something new in the world. Okay? So beginning something new in the world is actually already revolutionary. What is also interesting is bringing Arendt together with Rosa Luxemburg, and their notion of, both are using the notion of spontaneity in action. In different ways, but still, and there's very good literature about it, comparing these two notions. So for Arendt, action is always spontaneous, but not because it is chaotic, but because there's another. Do we have? So there are other. Thank you so much. There are other notions that I did not mention in my talk, like. Like natality and plurality. Natality is the fact that we are all born as absolutely unique beings. So everyone is a unique human person upon birth, a person who is different from anyone who ever existed, who exists now and will ever exist. Which means that we are bringing into the world and also, okay, yeah. And also, we are bringing into the world something that is radically new already. Yeah? This leads to our capacity of acting. So starting something new. We can start something new because we are radically new already. So this is one thing. Then plurality means not only that not one but many human beings inhabit the earth, but it also means that we are all equal as human, and at the same time, we are all different because of natality. And now, there's also a question of conditionality. And action. Arendt opposes a notion of human nature. So she says there's absolutely not anything like human nature, but a human is a conditioned being, and as human we are conditioned beings, conditioned by everything that we encounter. So anything we come in touch with conditions us. It's a relational definition, if one will. Okay? So this allows us keeping our status as unique beings, because everyone is conditioned in a different way. And an action, which always needs to happen in plural. So one person cannot act. We can only act when we come together. And now, if you think all that together, action must be spontaneous, because if unique people come together, their uniqueness exponentiates, right? So it becomes impossible to foresee the future of direction, because everyone brings something into this dynamic, so that the presumable aims of action can only be, let us say, something that directs us in a relatively, let's say, funding way, but not really, it's not really decisive for the direction our action eventually takes. So, I would say every action is revolutionary action, and the notion of revolution can also be used in a rhetoric way, which I partly do in this paper. So yeah.
Ok. ¿Alguien más tiene alguna pregunta? Ok. ¿Sí?
I have another question. This is more about the framework that you use in this article.
I assume that you read the whole.
I read the whole article, yes. So I'm curious about, from this type of feminist framework, you reached some conclusions about abortion and this desire that it should be private, but it must be first politicized in a positive way to reach like private translation, if I understood that correctly. If you apply the same framework to another feminist issue, for example, surrogacy, what type of conclusions do we get to? Because here in Colombia, the issue of surrogacy has become relevant in a feminist discourse because it's seen as possibly a way in which poor women's bodies are being instrumentalized by rich people, particularly rich people from other nations. But you have this type of situation where if you say one thing should be private and a woman should be able to choose about her body in abortion, then why shouldn't she be able to choose with regards to her body in surrogacy? So I have a question.
Okay, thank you for this question. It's a very good question. Not being a scholar of surrogacy, okay? I don't know very much about it. I know like the general frame of discussion, let's say. Yeah. But let me start somewhere else, namely that we reach this conclusion, and the conclusion is always open to rethinking and changing and adding new perspectives and whatnot. Yeah. So it's not like a conclusion that is being met forever. I would say that there's no reason to argue that if we reach a conclusion in one issue, we would reach the same conclusion in another issue. First. Then, spontaneously, this question makes me think, now I will disclose myself as a chaotic philosopher because I forgot what I wanted to say. It shows certain similarities, while it is not the same, to the discussion about sex work. Because it is to a certain extent a decision of a person, let's say, living in their body and owning the body to do something or not in economic sense. Yeah? So at this point, more or less, the similarities end, but I think it's a completely different issues because of the economic aspect. So it's like, yeah, a difficult question, of course. It's a difficult question from very many perspectives. It is difficult because it involves a child that is being born out of this practice and what happens to it, and the rights of this child and so on and so forth. I think you all know more about that than me. But it also, of course, involves the feminist issues of women's bodies being used and abused for this particular purpose. I'm not sure if I have much more to say about it at this point, but I would generally say it's not the same, of course, yeah, and it should be then theorized and discussed in more details than I can do this right now. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question. So, gracias.
Yo quisiera hacer una pregunta porque tengo muchos interrogantes abiertos, de pronto como para hilar un poco y tener como un resumen, digamos, general de la idea. De lo que por lo menos yo sé de Hannah Arendt en relación con las sociedades totalitarias, las sociedades modernas, contemporáneas, que están fragmentadas, las personas están fragmentadas, no tienen conciencia sobre qué le aqueja a los demás. Estas sociedades fragmentadas se prestan para que un poder totalitario, ¿sí?, haga lo que quiera, invada espacios y cometa, digamos, atrocidades de tipo sistemático y estructural, ¿sí? En esta sociedad moderna que se presta para el totalitarismo, Hannah Arendt nos explica que los individuos están designados a ocupar justamente el ámbito de lo privado, ¿sí? Y no toman acciones, no se interesan, digamos, por lo público, lo político, lo colectivo, lo comunitario, ¿sí? Y eso es lo que permite que ciertas voces, oposiciones o poderes, digámoslo así, de la sociedad cometan atrocidades sistemáticas. Desde este punto de vista, de lo que yo entiendo de Hannah Arendt, uno podría decir que la violencia patriarcal, ¿sí?, es un modo más, digamos, es una forma más de dominio totalitario que puede ser usado por poderes, y en ese sentido, desde ese punto de vista, las mujeres que evidenciamos dicha violencia estructural podemos tomar acción, ¿sí?, podríamos tomar acción, o esa sería la vía, el camino para superar ese problema de fragmentación. Deberíamos tomar acción y elevar las peticiones, los reclamos, los problemas justamente en el espacio de lo público, y articular soluciones en el campo de lo público, lo comunitario y lo político, más no lo privado. En ese orden de ideas, y para no irme con ninguna duda, lo que tú sugieres de pronto sería entonces como una especie de dialéctica, que en algún momento tuvimos que visibilizar el problema de la restricción de nuestros derechos reproductivos como mujeres, que todavía existen, y eso necesariamente tenemos que tomar acción, tenemos que elevarlo al ámbito de lo público, pero dado que la estructura no cambia, ¿sí?, una vía sería retornarlo al ámbito de lo privado, pero ya es un ámbito privado distinto al punto de partida. Entonces yo estoy viendo como una especie de dialéctica que tú sugieres en torno a lo que Hannah Arendt ve en las sociedades modernas que están fragmentadas y que se prestan para violencia, digamos, estructural, ¿no? La práctica de violencias estructurales.
I guess I would follow this question roughly, but if you are able to sum it up for me, that would be helpful. If you didn't expect it,
I think I would confuse the question a little bit if I tried to sum it up.
Okay, so let me rephrase it so that I know that I'm answering the right question. So. And also, shorten it a bit. So the idea is that that patriarchy is kind of a version of totalitarianism in the sense that it keeps women as inferior and unable of action, and this, well, maybe I add something here, but this is basically present in all the world and nearly all cultures. And yeah. Okay, so in this sense, totalitarian properly, yeah. And then how protests are kind of breaking of this scheme and return to privacy would again be re-establishing this. Okay, so first thing that comes to my mind is basically yes, and I very much hope that that it was clear that the part of my talk about abortion decision being a private decision is a little bit of a wishful thinking, yeah, or quite a lot. So this is it, and then if we speak about, for example, countries, because in liberal democracies today, or in democracies of any kind that allow public political action, it is also possible for women to take action. One. Second, action takes place in the public, but there might be conditions not allowing women to go outside of their private sphere to act in the public. And these conditions might be of patriarchal kind. So, for example, women who experience violence in the private sphere might be prevented from stepping out to the public and fighting for their rights. This is a difficult situation, a situation that women must act against, but during we do this, it is necessary that they are represented. Yeah, it's not the same. It's not the same to go to the street as to be represented. This is also true, for example, for disabled people who cannot take part in gatherings. This is what Judith Butler is speaking a lot about. But also women who are kept in the private because of patriarchal reasons, sure. Yeah. This brings me again to the idea of totalitarianism, because there are also places on this planet right now where feminist protest is generally impossible. Yeah. And this brings me to the idea of Arendt that under totalitarian conditions, action is simply impossible. So there is the light of the public dims, as she says. So it is not visible anymore. You cannot leave the totalitarian structures that are limiting you to a grand extent. And do anything political in the public, together with others, acting and speaking, because this Arendt band of totalitarianism, right? This to recall this metaphor, is so tight that we all kind of melt into one peoples, yeah. And cannot do anything except being pushed in the direction of totalitarianism. So in a certain way, and not abusing the notion of totalitarianism in Arendt, I would say that you can say about societies like this that it is a kind of patriarchal totalitarian situation. Does it answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Bueno, ¿alguien más? ¿Alguien más? Rafael.
Yeah, but I would like to say that, you know, like I would really like to hear what all of you think, and I'm not so terrible, so I can just take it from.
Me gustaría escuchar lo que ustedes piensan. Buena gente, no se preocupen.
I was thinking, how do we keep women safe in the private? Because I'm thinking in Europe, there has been very many movements which are very regressive when it comes to reproductive rights. So I think there would be a great way to start to left these matters to the private, to the families, to instruct the women to step out. But there are many cultures in Europe, there are many religions that actually don't think this is a very good idea for women to step out and say whatever they want. So how, from the public, without a major intervention, guarantee women to step out, even when it comes to these very totalitarian structures?
Okay. Thank you for this question, and I can add to it that there are also very many women who say that they don't need feminism, and who said that they want to go back to the family structures that are, let's say, not all encompassing these days. So, a woman of the home and having children and not working and all that, yeah. So women, as all other people, have different perspectives on the world. And it is basically good so, but it is also sometimes harmful. And religion, then in religious structures that are, let's say, straight, often very patriarchal, are a part of this whole environment. So, let's say, I don't see an easy solution to it, and I don't see an easy answer to your question. Because there are at least two perspectives that, or at least, let's say, at least two important points in this kind of thinking and this kind of arguing that are important. And the first one is that every political philosophy needs a standpoint. So I'm speaking from my theoretical standpoint, trying to, let's say, reach out to you and have an understanding. Not that you understand with my that you agree with my standpoint, but much more that we understand each other. Because this is what we need in philosophy altogether, and in political philosophy in particular. The other thing is that philosophical argumentation about and sometimes against religion is a minefield. Yeah? So I can say here publicly that I'm a very happy atheist, so I have no problems with that. But at the same time, I do know that for many people, and as it comes also, for example, for many Muslim women who are feminists at the same time, it is a very important part of their lives. Yeah? So this, I know that this is a very bad answer to this question, but it's complicated. Yeah. So yeah, it's no answer. But it is a very important issue, and I'm very happy that you addressed it.
Thank you.
Okay, Rafael, ¿no más? ¿Alguna pregunta? Gracias.
Small question.
¿Alguien más? Bueno, sí, una última pregunta para cerrar la sesión.
Just a curiosity about Arendt's thinking here. Sometimes while reading your article or generally thinking about abortion, I sometimes feel that when a woman isn't allowed to decide about her body, and the state is instrumentalizing her body, there's a type of like dehumanization in the sense of an Arendt's sense. Do you think this is the case, or not? Using a woman's body as a means and not an end is a type of dehumanization.
Arendt speaks about dehumanization mostly, correct me if I'm wrong, in the context of totalitarianism and Holocaust.
Yes.
So I would generally say no, because I think it's a different process. Because instrumentalizing a woman's body in the sense of if you say instrumentalizing, then you always need to also know what the aim of this practice is, because you are instrumentalizing for something, right?
Yes.
So I would say that okay, two things. That abortion ban is instrumentalizing a woman's body, first of all, for empowering women altogether, and the pregnant woman who is denied abortion in particular. And then the second thing is also what I wanted to but did not speak, the broader political perspective, which shows how issues like abortion are being used for political processes to draw attention away from much more all-encompassing and important democratic decisions that are taking place. And I'm in particular referring to the Polish situation, where like roughly in 2020 and in 2021, the then government was deconstructing Polish democracy, while in fact producing a public stir about women's rights, about so-called gender ideology and stuff like this. So everyone was super interested in that, but not that the Constitutional Court was being disembodied. You know, so those two things. Yeah, but I think it's not the same process.
Thank you.
Bueno, ¿nadie más se anima? ¿No? Ok, entonces yo creo que podemos dar por cerrada la sesión. ¿Quieres dar algunas palabras de cierre finales?
Sí, muchas gracias y me encantó mucho su...
Que ustedes están aquí. Gracias por su presencia y asistencia.
Por su presencia y asistencia.